Bomani Jones, ESPN, Right Time is the podcast, Game Theory, HBO, new episode tonight. One more thing that I wanted to talk about before we actually get into something I've been looking forward to chatting with you about from last week's episode related to Overtime Elite and how young people watch sports these days. You're in New York now. Mm-hmm. And New York is the land of super rich people with weirdo behavior. Okay? And I know you're making a heck of a lot more money now than you did when you were working here. I mean, all I gotta do is go to the newspaper and see how much money you're making. It's all good. And you know me, I'm really happy for you. But,
yeah, sure sounds like it.
Come on now, Bomani. But what I worried about is that has the money made you do some weirdo behavior, like, I don't know, go into a Hobbit-like 300 square foot darkness retreat to find yourself? You haven't done any of that, have you?
No, as I've been saying, I have done a darkness retreat before, but it was for the opposite reason of being rich. They just cut the lights off. They just decided that until I got that money over there, I was going to be doing a darkness retreat.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I didn't have time to find myself. I was trying to find the money to pay my lights. Aaron Rodgers. I actually talked to somebody who had some familiarity with that class of rich people, and what the woman says is between like 100 million and a billion, they're all terrible people. They're pretty cool below and above those numbers, but that is the space where people just do really weird stuff and treat people really badly is in there. And I imagine that Aaron Rodgers has stacked up $100 million, and I say that because this dude wants me to believe that he got to go in the dark to decide if he wants to take his 60 guaranteed millions of dollars.
I think he just
can only do that if you got 100.
I think he just likes the attention. You talk about that 100 million to a billion. I mean, we know of a billionaire who wants to make sure that you see his tweets, and if you don't, somebody's getting fired. All right?
Yeah, but let's be clear about this with Aaron Rodgers. And I hate the smug self-satisfaction that he brings with his steez, and I imagine that some of you find that to be an ironic statement coming from me. And the truth is, all you guys, A, are jerks, and B, every single one of you would acknowledge that I'm a lot smarter than Aaron Rodgers. Now, that's not to say that Aaron Rodgers is not smart, because occasionally he does say some things about this world and this media culture that we're in that there's something to, right? Like, he's not wrong all the time. The stuff that he's wrong about, he just seems to be so insanely wrong when it comes up. But he's just smart enough to think that he is outsmarted everybody else. And that's the problem that I got with him.
Yeah. Well, the Panthers would love to trade for him. The Jets would love to trade for him.
Can you?
But this is the question about trading for him. It's just like, what is the time discount that you put on this? Because I feel like you can only reasonably assume that you're going to get one good year out of him.
Yeah.
Maybe.
The way that draft capital flies around for quarterbacks now, the Packers probably aren't parting with him for fewer than 2 first-round picks. Are you really giving up 2 first-round picks to roll the dice on that weirdo?
No.
Coming through for you for this one season, coming off the worst season of his career, right? Like, we already had a situation where his play dipped off and he brought it back. Are we sure that's going to happen twice?
I just want to see him in New York one way or the other, because it gets back to how we started this conversation. Rich dudes with weirdo behavior being in New York, you'll find his people, man.
Yeah. But see, this is the thing about him coming to New York. He's coming, according to the theories that we got out here, would be coming to the Jets.
Yes.
And the problem with coming to the Jets is the Jets are perceived here as the screw-up organization. Now, not like the Giants have been much better over the last 10 years.
They're the same
but
team.
That's the way it's treated, right? So when Aaron Rodgers does ridiculous things, it's going to get treated and covered differently with the Jets than it would be with the Giants. I'm just saying that, people assume a credibility of the Green Bay Packers that they do not assume of the Jets. So if he's out here talking weird and they losing, especially since they're literally a quarterback away, oh, man, you say it'll be great. I don't want to live here. It'll be too much.
Bomani Jones, ESPN, Right Time is a podcast, HBO Game Theory, which is what I wanted to talk about with you today, because last week, I guess without knowing it, was leading into what you were going to talk about on Game Theory related to young people watching sports and how it's consumed today. So I watched I watched the episode over the weekend, and I feel like the All-Star game gave you the exact ammunition you were looking for. It was the lowest rated All-Star game in recent memory. However, NBA Communications tweeted this out after the All-Star game. Most viewed Instagram account, most viewed brand account on Twitter, most viewed ever on the NBA app, most viewed slam dunk ever, which gets to Matt McClung, or Mac McClung. I don't even know the guy's name. I just know he's Matt. He's an influence, right? Gilio joked with me. He's like, "You ever heard of that guy?" I'm like, "Yeah, come on." As extremely online as I am, I know who that dude is. But I feel like this was the perfect example of what's going on with the NBA right now. Nobody's actually watching it, but we're engaging with it. Brian, you even said this. Like, you don't watch NBA games, but what do?
I listen to the podcast because I want to hear all the trade talk.
So how do you the problem is you make money by people watching it live on television.
Right.
How do you monetize this other stuff?
I don't know. I just have so much I don't know, but I do think that even if you are the biggest advocate for any notion of player empowerment and everything else, right? You do have to acknowledge having guys play some time in college and then come into the NBA was much better for the product. And it was better for the product just in terms of familiarity.
Yeah.
I don't know who anybody is. Like, they're about to have a draft. It's going to be Big Vic and that Scoot Henderson dude and a bunch of dudes that I personally have never heard of. Well, hold on. My fault. I've heard of Brandon Miller now. Okay.
Now we know.
Hey, I wasn't up on him before. I'm up on game now. I'm up on game now. But no, what's wild about it is the basketball is really good, and it's the basketball that everybody begged for, right? Like, they did everything to give people the basketball that they ultimately wanted. I think that LeBron James sticking around too long has been a problem, and I also think it's worth noting for that All-Star game that both of the captains couldn't play in the second half because they were hurt. Right. And it's Salt Lake City All-Star game. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what to make of this, but I do think the NBA has some really troubling trends with their television. There's no way around that.
But does it say something that, and I know he's really good, but a 7'4" French guy is more well-known than anybody in college basketball?
Well, the 7-foot French guy, we've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah. He's a unicorn at this point. Come on.
I
mean,
get
LeBron
it, but,
James.
you know,
LeBron James was more famous than Carmelo Anthony in 2003. Yeah.
Sure.
You know,
but the fact that you can't name anyone in college basketball, and we can't either, really.
Well, the reason I can't is, like, it's kind of wild. It doesn't come up at my job ever.
No.
You know what I mean? Like there's no time that even if I were still doing daily television, right, which I don't, college basketball doesn't come up. When you look at the numbers, like at websites and stuff like that do this, the college basketball nationally just doesn't do the numbers. What's interesting is that the women's game now has what the men's game used to have, which is they can reasonably say that these are the best players in the world under 22.
Yes.
They got familiarity. People know who the players are. I could name some women's NCAA players for you.
We've seen it here.
I can't really do it with men's.
We've seen it here, and Giulio's made this point. If you long for the old days of the ACC, just watch women's basketball because the players have stuck around. There's heat in the rivalries with NC State and Carolina, NC State and Duke, etc., which doesn't really play off on the men's side of this because nobody sticks around. So, but I wanted to get back to the NBA, and I don't think they're alone. I feel like my theory is that the NBA understands where these things are headed, okay? Major League Baseball doesn't. College athletics doesn't. And the NBA is at least attempting to stay engaged with its audience, and maybe they'll understand how to make money later. These are all problems that every other league is going to have to deal with right now, as the one remaining entity that actually is huge enough to command that kind of money is the NFL, and to a certain extent Big Ten and SEC football. So maybe the NBA has an advantage understanding and being extremely online. But it gets back to the central premise. How do you make money? I can put all these radio clips on YouTube and it can get thousands of views, but what is it that we have to sell? The ratings on the radio show, regardless of how you feel about radio as an entity. That's still what ultimately pays the bills. And I don't have answers, man.
Yeah, no, like I can pull back the curtain a little bit for people. And Joe, you can tell people about this.
Yeah.
I was a little bit of a pioneer in the idea of we should put this content on the internet.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the argument that always came up, and I understood it. I had a disagreement with the argument was, yeah, but we can't make no money off of that, right? It was just all funneling. You want to funnel people to the money thing. So my buddy Nick Wright talks about some dude in Kansas City. I don't know who it is. Big, like one of your standard morning radio show hosts,
Yeah.
been there forever.
Yeah.
Doesn't put a bit or a byte of content on the internet at all.
Yeah.
Come over here where we get this money. That's what he's going for. And so the NBA, though, I think the bigger problem and where they have to worry is what happens if a new generation doesn't actually consume the sport itself.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be hard for them to have any real, like, brand identity or, like, loyalty to what it is that you're doing if all they want is 5-second clips.
Bomani Jones, ESPN. Right Time is the podcast. HBO, Game Theory tonight. What can we
Not tonight. Not
tonight?
Not tonight. We are in a working dark week. Because let me tell you something, brother. And Joe, you can vouch for this. I once did a year of radio where I did 50 out of 52 Saturdays. I was doing a summer where I was doing 2 shows in a day. I was doing, man, let me tell you something. They told us we ain't have to do no show this week. I ain't never been looking like it. It wasn't even like a full week off. Like, we was still doing other stuff. I don't know if I'm getting old or what, but I was like, oh yeah, a break. That sounds phenomenal.
Just to be clear, a working dark week is different than what Aaron Rodgers did.
Yeah, I don't think he was in there breaking down
Okay.
film. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't get that feeling.
As I approach 44, Bo, maybe one of these days I'll know what that's like. I don't know. I'm still doing those.
You still out here doing these hours of radio a day. Man.
Hey, I don't know. Maybe it's like me and Gold feed off of it. Like Gilio gets super sleepy. Like I'm gonna try to go to 4 games tomorrow, right? Because there's all 3 local schools are playing basketball and the Hurricanes are playing. So Luke DeCock and the News and Observer and I are like, hey, let's see how many minutes of actual game time we can watch by going to all these games. I brought this up to Gilio, who's like, absolutely not. I'm tired thinking about it. He's sleepy pants all the time.
Now, I've never done partner radio, so like maybe that's a little different. Like maybe that can get you a little charged up. But I remember when I stopped doing them 3 hours a day of radio and decided I wanted to go do a podcast, I had no idea what a great idea. Like that's the best idea I've ever had.
Well, maybe you need to talk to Gilio because sometimes I do have those moments where it's like, hey man, great Monday show, and I always tell him, guess what we get to do tomorrow? And we get to talk about the same stuff and make it sound exciting. I got no problems though, man. I got no problems. All right, Bo, we'll talk to you next week.
All right, man, you guys take it easy.
It's the OG.